Tomorrow morning, every language on Earth disappears. Not English, not Hindi, not Spanish, nothing. You wake up, look at your family, and try to say good morning. They stare back at you with blank faces. You point toward the kitchen, hoping someone understands you're hungry. Instead, they walk away. Minutes later, a child begins crying outside. Someone suddenly starts waving their arms, pointing toward the trees. Are they warning everyone? Or asking for help? You have no idea. Before we begin, if you enjoy discovering the forgotten stories that shaped humanity, consider subscribing. Every week we uncover another forgotten chapter of our past that explains why humans became who they are. Now imagine living like this, not for one day, not for 1 year, but for hundreds of thousands of years. No words, no writing, no alphabets, no dictionaries. Yet somehow, your ancestors still hunted together, raised families together, built friendships, buried their dead, and eventually created every language on Earth. How? Most people imagine ancient humans making random grunts while wildly pointing at things. It's a simple picture, and it's almost certainly wrong. Because the biggest misunderstanding about language is believing language is the same thing as communication. It isn't. Right now, without saying a single word, you already know when someone is angry. You know when they're nervous. You know when they're afraid. A smile, a raised eyebrow, a clenched fist, a simple glance. Your brain understands all of them instantly. Long before humans ever formed their first sentence, their bodies were already speaking. In fact, the oldest language in human history may never have been spoken at all. It may have been seen. And strangely, the first clues don't come from ancient humans. They come from chimpanzees. Imagine standing deep inside an African forest. A group of chimpanzees quietly searches for fruit. Suddenly, one chimp freezes. It stares into the trees. The others immediately stop moving. Nobody makes a speech. Nobody explains the danger. Within seconds, the entire group changes direction. Scientists studying chimpanzees have documented dozens of intentional gestures. They reach, they wave, they stomp, they extend an open hand. If another chimp ignores the gesture, they repeat it, again and again, until they're understood. That's remarkably human. Because communication doesn't begin with words, it begins with intention. Our closest living relatives already understand that, which means our ancestors almost certainly did too, long before the first language ever existed. But gestures could only solve part of the problem. Imagine you're standing on an open plain nearly 50,000 years ago. The wind carries the smell of dust. Ahead of you, a herd of wild horses grazes peacefully. Around you, 19 other hunters spread across the landscape. One wrong move, one loud shout, and the hunt is over. Days of tracking, gone. Food for your family, gone. This wasn't the time for talking. It was the time for silence. Today, military units use hand signals. Scuba divers use hand signals. Special forces use hand signals. Not because they're primitive, because sometimes silence communicates better than words ever could. Ancient humans understood that long before history began. A raised hand. Wait. 2 fingers pointing left. Move. A slow wave downward. Stay low. Nobody knows exactly what those signals looked like. They disappeared tens of thousands of years ago. But archaeologists know something else. Humans became incredibly successful hunters. Not because they were stronger than other predators. Not because they were faster. But because they worked together. Perfect coordination doesn't happen by accident. It requires communication, even without language. And perhaps that's the strangest part. The first conversations that changed our species may have happened without anyone speaking at all. But hunting wasn't humanity's greatest challenge. Teaching was. Imagine you're 6 years old. Your mother kneels beside a small fire. In front of her lies a sharp piece of stone. Carefully, she strikes it with another rock. Tiny flakes fall away, again and again, until the edge becomes razor sharp. Tomorrow, that tool might save someone's life. One day, it will be yours to make. But there's a problem. Nobody can explain how. There are no lessons, no schools, no books. No words like hold it this way or hit the edge at this angle. Instead, you watch. Every movement, every mistake, every success. The next day, you try. You fail. You try again. Your mother doesn't give a lecture. She simply makes another tool. You watch again. Scientists call this observational learning, but in reality, it may be one of the greatest inventions in human history. Almost everything your ancestors knew, how to make fire, how to shape a spear, how to prepare animal hides, how to build shelter, how to recognize poisonous plants, passed from one generation to the next, long before writing, and perhaps even before true language. Knowledge survived because humans became extraordinary imitators, watching, copying, improving, generation after generation. Without that ability, civilization would have ended before it ever began. But then, something happened that changed human history forever. Humans stopped communicating only about what they could see. They started communicating about things that weren't there. And that changed everything. Because this ability to learn by watching gave humans something no other species had ever achieved: knowledge that could outlive the individual. A hunter could die. A toolmaker could grow old. But the skills remained. Not trapped inside one person's mind, passed from one pair of hands to the next. For hundreds of thousands of years, that was enough. Then one day, it wasn't. Imagine your hunting group finds a river hidden beyond the hills. It's full of fish, fresh water, safe campsites, the perfect place to return next season. But winter arrives. Months pass. The river is gone from sight. How do you tell someone about a place they can't see anymore? You can't point to it. You can't demonstrate it. You have to describe it. For the first time, humans needed to communicate ideas that existed only inside the mind. Not danger, not food, not what was happening right now, but yesterday, tomorrow, somewhere else. That single change may have transformed our species forever. Scientists believe this ability is one of the defining features of modern humans. We don't just communicate about reality, we communicate about imagination. A place you've never visited, a person you've never met, a story that never happened. Every civilization, every religion, every law, every scientific discovery began with one person placing an idea into another person's mind. And archaeology suggests that transformation began much earlier than anyone once believed. In South Africa, inside a cave called Blombos, researchers discovered pieces of red ochre carved with repeating geometric patterns. They're around 75,000 years old. Nobody knows exactly what they meant. Maybe they marked ownership. Maybe they represented families. Maybe they carried spiritual meaning. Or maybe they were something completely different. The truth is, nobody can say for certain. But one thing is impossible to ignore. Someone spent time carving a symbol, expecting another human being to understand it. That wasn't decoration alone, it was communication. For the first time, ideas could survive after the speaker had walked away, and humans never looked back. Around the same period, people began wearing shell beads. Not because shells kept them warm, not because they made hunting easier, but because they meant something: status, identity, belonging. A silent message carried wherever you went. Even today, wedding rings, military uniforms, company logos, school badges, they're all doing exactly the same thing: communicating without a single word. But perhaps the greatest mystery has never been solved. When was the first word ever spoken? Nobody knows. There was no audience, no recording, no cave painting showing the moment it happened. Only clues hidden inside our own biology. One clue comes from a gene called FOXP2, sometimes called the language gene, although that's a simplification. This gene helps control the precise movements needed for speech. Humans carry a version that differs slightly from many other animals. Surprisingly, Neanderthals appear to have carried a very similar version too, which raises an extraordinary possibility. Perhaps they weren't silent either. Perhaps conversations older than our own species echoed across Ice Age landscapes tens of thousands of years ago. Scientists still debate exactly how language evolved. Some believe it began with gestures. Others think emotional sounds slowly became more precise. Some argue that singing came before speech. Others believe language emerged gradually over hundreds of thousands of years, becoming more complex with every generation. The truth is, nobody knows. And that's what makes this one of the greatest mysteries in human history. We know language changed the world. We just don't know exactly when the world changed. But maybe we've been asking the wrong question all along. Instead of asking, when did humans invent language? Perhaps we should ask, when did communication become powerful enough to build civilization? Because language wasn't created in a single moment. It wasn't invented by one genius. It wasn't discovered like fire. It evolved. One gesture, one expression, one sound, one shared meaning at a time. Every parent teaching a child, every hunter warning a friend, every family gathered around a fire, each generation adding something new, until eventually, those simple signals became stories. Those stories became history, and history became us. Today, more than 300 billion emails are sent every single day. Trillions of text messages travel around the world every year. With a single tap, you can speak to someone on the other side of the planet. You can share an idea with millions of people you've never met. Yet every conversation you've ever had, every promise, every joke, every argument, every song, every bedtime story, every whispered "I love you" exists because somewhere, long before cities, long before writing, long before history itself, one human looked at another and simply wanted to be understood. If you enjoyed this journey into our past, consider subscribing. Every week, we uncover another forgotten story that explains why humans became who they are. Because the words you're hearing right now are the newest chapter in a conversation that began hundreds of thousands of years ago.